Part 4 of the State Capture Inquiry Report was handed over to the Presidency this morning. It comprised of 4 volumes focusing on, among others, the attempted capture of National Treasury, Eskom, and the Free State Asbestos Project Debacle. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Mark Swilling of the School of Public Leadership at Stellenbosch University. Prof, thank you for availing yourself on this Friday. And just a disclaimer before we enter the conversation that it's quite a voluminous read, like over 1,000 pages of the report. But on the role of Matsela Koko in the capture of state energy utility Eskom, what thoughts came to mind from the parts that you were able to go through?
Well, there's a sentence that really struck me, and I'll quote it, which is, Koko facilitated the capture of Eskom by the Guptas. Close quote. But, I mean, that is quite a stunning sentence, and confirms a lot of evidence and research that journalists and academics have done since 2017 to try and understand what happened to Eskom. And what we have here is chapter and verse, detailed breakdowns, daily, almost daily, day-by-day account of what happened when that resulted in a really serious looting of Eskom as an SOE.
Let's just expand on that and just, remind our viewers the extent of damage that has been caused.
Well, the extent of damage, runs into the tens of billions. And as we know, the current Eskom leadership have mounted legal actions to reclaim billions from the consulting companies like McKinsey, as well as from senior executives. But the real damage is what we feel on an everyday basis, which is load shedding, slow growth, job losses, as a result of the institutional weakness and over-indebtedness of Eskom to the tune of now nearly 400 billion rand.
Eskom has released a statement this afternoon in light of this news, saying in this regard, Eskom, working closely with the Special Investigating Unit, has been successful in recovering 1.1 billion rand from McKinsey, 1.577 billion rand from ABB, as well as several other significant cases, and furthermore initiated civil actions to recover some of the monies lost to state capture, including 3.8 billion rand in damages suffered by Eskom due to unlawful actions by those implicated in state capture. And I quote there, does this go somewhere, rather, in ensuring or instilling a sense of confidence among the public that something is being done?
Well, I think we can be grateful that we have a management that responds with such alacrity by setting up a task team to address the challenges. So instead of being defensive and obfuscating and denying, we have here a leadership that says, yes, we have had problems in the past. Yes, there may well be people who are still employed who are implicated. And yes, there are people who used to be employed who owe us money. And we're going out to get it because we're a publicly owned company. We're the taxpayer. We're accountable to the taxpayers. And we have to get this money back that was looted. Obviously, they're not going to get the majority of what was stolen. And more importantly, it's going to take a long, long time to fix the institution that was so badly damaged.
I'd like for us to expand on that, right? So one of the recommendations in the report is that the National Prosecuting Authority should consider criminal prosecution of Mr. Koko, Mr. Mboweni, Mr. Ndeta, and Mr. Roo for the contraventions of the legislation and policies of Eskom already referred to above. So there is clearly enough evidence against the implicated individuals. How does the power utility prevent something similar from happening in the future?
Well, firstly, just to go back to those names, the report lists 6 names. 3 of them were Eskom employees, and 3 of them were employees of Tegeta, the Gupta-owned company that owned the mine. Sorry, not the mine, the colliery, or the mine, that was providing the coal to Eskom. So 3 out of those 6 are officials, public servants, who colluded in very explicit ways in in bending the rules of the game. So Eskom would buy substandard coal, which in turn causes serious damage. So how the NPA then acts against those three officials as well as the Tregeta staff is what is going to be really important in the future in putting out the correct signal. Until people end up in orange overalls behind bars, the message is going to be you can get away with looting. So there has to be action. So I think the answer to your question would be Eskom needs to make sure that all the evidence will be made available to the prosecuting authority, and the prosecuting authorities need to focus, get a team together that takes action. So that's the best way of limiting this kind of destructive activity in the future.
To your message of a clear, or to your point rather, of a clear message being sent that there should be repercussions. You've got state capture, you've got the COVID-19 procurement looting, for lack of a better phrase. You've got what is happening now with the floods in KwaZulu-Natal that we saw a couple of weeks ago, where there are serious concerns that monies will not go to where they're supposed to go to. So, Prof, essentially, I guess, what does this speak to? A leadership deficit? We've got the rules, we all know them, but they continue to be flouted.
Well, I think it's a combination of a leadership deficit, a kind of limp-wristed and soft approach rather than a decisive, aggressive approach. But it's also a cultural problem. So we have a culture across South Africa, in our institutions, in the public and the private sector. I mean, after all, it's the McKinseys, it's the ADBs who are implicated. We have a culture across South African public and private institutions of extraction, of legitimizing the assumption that greed is good. If you can get away with it, do it. And even if you did have a strong leadership that was acting, it would help to address that culture. But actually, we need a much deeper social-cultural transformation at the base of our society, where the media has to play a role. We have to have workshops, we have to have discussions, very similar to what led up to the end of apartheid, which we celebrated the other day in Freedom Day. The kind of build-up of a social movement to reclaim accountability and a decent way of operating and living.
Do you perceive, Prof, that South Africans have the bandwidth for that, especially people who are hard-pressed, who are barely surviving?
Well, they are the biggest losers, and they have the most to gain. And it is, I mean, the trade unions, the social movements, the human rights organizations, the legal fraternity. There's a broad coalition of forces in South Africa that are becoming increasingly disillusioned with what is happening. And the president himself said it when he was in KZN, when he said it's a deep shame that the first discussion about the KZN floods is that the money might get stolen. And that was exactly the right tone to hit. It's up to us now as citizens to do something about it. So yes, you're right. People are suffering. People are hard-pressed. There is very little time and energy for anything else other than basic survival. But at the same time, there is the potential for collective action to put the right kind of pressure on elites to change their ways.
Professor Mark Swilling of Stellenbosch University, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.